If you're going to cheat on me, at least have the decency not to do it at our child's birthday party in our own house while our kids are watching. I never thought I'd be the kind of man to question my wife's whereabouts. I trusted her. We had been married for years, raising 3 kids together, building what most people would call a happy home. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but I believed in what we had. I believed in her. That's why, when we decided to throw a big birthday party for our youngest child, I didn't think twice about inviting friends, family, and even the neighbors. It was supposed to be a beautiful evening, a chance to celebrate as a family, to see the kids laughing, to enjoy the warmth of the people we loved. The house was filled with life, kids running around, balloons tied to every chair, music playing in the background, and the smell of grilled meat filling the air. I played the role of the proud father, making sure everything ran smoothly. I moved from table to table, greeting guests, and making sure everyone had a drink in their hand and a plate of food in front of them. My wife, Amma, was doing the same, at least at first. She was all smiles, moving through the crowd effortlessly. But as the evening wore on, I started to realize something. She kept disappearing. I'd glance around the yard, scanning through familiar faces, expecting to see her, but she wasn't there. Maybe she was inside checking on the food, I told myself. Maybe she was in the bathroom. Maybe she was just taking a moment for herself. I didn't think too much of it until it happened again. And again. One moment, she'd be right there, smiling, laughing, chatting with guests. The next, she was gone. And when I finally spotted her again, it was as if she had appeared out of nowhere. Her face was calm, her smile still intact. But when I asked her where she had been, she waved it off with a casual, "Oh, I was just inside checking on a few things." I didn't think much about it. Kids don't miss much. People think they're too young, too innocent, too lost in their own world to understand what's happening around them. But they see things. They hear things. And sometimes they find things they were never meant to see. That night, as the party raged on outside, my children were doing what kids do best, playing, exploring, and sneaking off where they weren't supposed to be. The house was big, and with guests moving in and out, it wasn't hard for them to slip away unnoticed. They giggled as they chased each other through the hallways, hiding behind doors and peeking around corners. Then they saw something that made them stop in their tracks. There, in a dimly lit corner of the house, stood Alma, their mother. But she wasn't alone. Alex, the bachelor neighbor everyone whispered about, was with her. Alex was the kind of man people talked about in hushed tones. Mid-30s, always well-dressed, smooth-talking. The type who never settled down despite all the women throwing themselves at him. People saw him as a playboy, but I never thought much of it. After all, what did it have to do with me? Apparently everything. The kids stood frozen as they watched their mother wrapped in Alex's arms. His hands were on her waist. Her fingers were tangled in his shirt. Their faces were inches apart, their lips brushing. A scene that no child should ever have to witness. They were too young to fully grasp what was happening, but they knew this wasn't right. This wasn't something Daddy would want to see. Before they could process the shock, footsteps approached. A family friend, one of the guests who had stepped inside to grab some things, walked right into the scene. She barely had time to react before a sharp gasp escaped her lips. Alma and Alex jerked apart instantly, guilt flashing across their faces. But it was too late. The kids had seen. The family friend had seen. The damage was done. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Alma's breathing was heavy, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Alex ran a hand through his hair, avoiding eye contact. I was outside, making sure the guests were comfortable when I saw Bridget, a longtime family friend, approaching me. Her face was pale. Something was wrong. She grabbed my wrist, pulling me aside with a sense of urgency. "We need to talk," she whispered, her voice shaking. I frowned, my mind racing with possibilities. "What is it?" I asked, trying to read the worry in her eyes. She hesitated for a moment, glancing around to ensure no one was listening before leaning in and dropping a bombshell. I just walked in on Alma and Alex, she said in a low voice. They were together, alone. And it wasn't just talking. A cold chill spread through my body. What do you mean together? My voice came out lower than I intended, almost as if I was afraid to hear the answer. Bridget inhaled sharply, her fingers tightening around my wrist. I mean exactly what you're thinking. No. Not Alma. Not my wife. Not the mother of my children. The possibility was too painful to accept. Without another word, I turned and stormed inside. I moved quickly, pushing past guests, my eyes scanning the house for her. I finally spotted her near the hallway. She was smiling, chatting with guests, looking as if nothing had happened. I walked straight up to her, my voice tight and controlled. Can we talk? She turned to me, a soft, unsuspecting smile on her face. Of course, she said without hesitation. I led her to a quieter corner, away from the guests. I tried to steady myself. What were you doing sneaking off with Alex? I asked, my words coming out sharper than I intended. She met my gaze with a confused expression before letting out a small, dismissive laugh. Oh, come on, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Her tone was light, as if I had just accused her of something absurd, something unthinkable. I didn't waver. I took a step closer, my jaw tightening. Don't lie to me, Alma. I already know. Her expression didn't change. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, crossing her arms over her chest in mock annoyance. Know what exactly? That I was having a conversation with a neighbor. She let out another small laugh, shaking her head. This is ridiculous. Before I could respond, a small voice cut through the air, stopping everything in its tracks. Mom, we saw you with Uncle Alex, my son said softly. I turned slowly, my heart sinking as I saw my child standing nearby. His innocent eyes darted between us, confusion and fear flickering across his face. We saw you sneak away, he continued hesitantly. And he was touching you in the... Alma snapped her head toward him so fast. What did you just say? She cut him off, her voice sharp, her eyes narrowing as she took a step forward. The boy's lips trembled as he shrank back under her gaze. He stammered, suddenly unsure. Who did you say you saw again? She asked, her voice dangerously low now. The sweetness from earlier had vanished completely, replaced with something else. Her expression was no longer one of guilt or shock. It was something far worse. She wasn't afraid of being caught. She was furious that our child had spoken. Watched as my son's shoulders slumped, his little hands balling into fists at his sides. He looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know. Alma exhaled slowly, then turned back to me, her face smoothing into something unreadable. She straightened her posture, lifting her chin as if she had just regained control of the situation. See, she said, her voice calm and composed. Kids imagine things. You're really going to believe a child over your wife? My breath hitched. The words, the tone, the sheer audacity of it all. It was as if she was daring me to question her, daring me to push back against her denial. She wasn't just lying. She was twisting the entire situation, trying to make herself the victim. I looked at my son, who now stood there silent, staring at the ground. He had seen the truth. I had seen the truth reflected in his eyes. And yet, Alma was still lying. Even when the evidence was staring her in the face, she refused to acknowledge what had happened. I didn't argue. What was the point? I let the conversation drop, let the night move on as if nothing had happened. But in my mind, I knew the truth. I knew that, from this moment forward, everything had changed. That night, I lay in bed beside Alma, staring blankly at the ceiling while she slept as if nothing had happened. Her breathing was steady, her face calm. My mind refused to quiet down. How long has this been going on, I thought. This wasn't some heat-of-the-moment mistake. No one risks everything at their child's birthday party unless they are far too comfortable in their deceit. They had to have been doing this for a long time. The ease with which she denied it, the way she manipulated our child into silence, the way she twisted the situation to make herself the victim. It all pointed to a well-practiced pattern of lies. My stomach twisted with unease. Had I been a fool this whole time? I tried to recall moments over the years when things hadn't quite added up. At the time, I brushed them off. She was my wife. I trusted her. Now I wasn't so sure. The next few days passed in a haze. Alma walked around the house with an air of indignation, slamming doors, huffing under her breath, acting as though she were the one wronged. She avoided my gaze, refused to acknowledge the weight in the air, and when I tried to bring it up, she shut it down immediately. "You're seriously still on this," she snapped one evening as I tried to talk. "I told you already I wasn't doing anything. But of course, you'd rather believe rumors and a child's imagination over your own wife." Her tone was sharp, her words carefully chosen to make me feel like I was the unreasonable one. I didn't respond. I just studied her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw something different. The more defensive she became, the more convinced I was that there was more she wasn't saying. The kids wouldn't lie. The family friend definitely saw something. But if she could look me in the eyes and deny everything with this much conviction, what else had she lied about? One night, as I sat on the couch watching my children play, a chilling thought crept into my mind, one I never imagined I would have to ask myself. Are they even mine? I hated myself for even thinking about it. I had been there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every first word. I was their father. But was I their biological father? I found myself studying their faces with such scrutiny before. My eldest, he was my mirror image. The same eyes, the same jawline. There was no doubt about him. But the other two, something didn't add up. Their features were softer, their complexions slightly different, and their mannerisms unfamiliar. I had never questioned it before, chalking it up to genetics. Maybe they took after Alma's side of the family. But now, after everything, I wasn't so sure. The thought took hold, refusing to leave. If Alma could lie so effortlessly about Alex, if she could look me in the eye and deny everything when the truth was right in front of her, what else had she been lying about? Had she been deceiving me for years? I needed answers. Over the next few days, I moved carefully, making sure not to raise suspicion. Alma had already convinced herself that I was paranoid, and I couldn't afford to tip her off. One by one, I quietly collected DNA samples, a few strands of hair from their pillows, a used toothbrush, and a nail clipping. The moment I had everything I needed, I sent the samples in for testing. And then I waited. The days dragged on. Alma continued with her charade, acting like she had been wronged, like I had imagined everything. The results arrived days later. I pull out the document, my eyes scanning the words, desperate for something, anything. But as my gaze lands on the results, everything inside me stops. Only one of the 3 children is mine. 2 of my children are not mine. I try to breathe, but it feels like my lungs have forgotten how. This betrayal, it's deeper than I ever could have imagined. Alma didn't just cheat. She didn't just break our vows. She didn't just make a fool out of me in front of family and friends. She stole something from me. She made me believe I was a father to children who weren't mine. She let me love them, sacrifice for them, and protect them, while secretly knowing that another man's blood ran through their veins. How long had she known? Had she stood there in the delivery room, watching me hold them for the first time, knowing the truth but keeping her mouth shut? Had she smiled at me across the dinner table, knowing I was breaking my back for children who weren't mine? Had she ever, even once, felt guilt for what she did to me? There is nothing left to fight for. There is nothing left to save. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I know exactly what I have to do. I have to leave. He doesn't confront her. There's no point. What more could she say? Another lie? Another excuse? Another desperate attempt to twist the truth? No, he's done playing this game. The truth is clear, and for once, Alma doesn't get to manipulate the narrative. Instead, he moves in silence. He quietly files for divorce, taking every necessary step to protect the one child that is truly his. He meets with lawyers, prepares his case, and ensures that when the time comes, he is ready. The moment Amma receives the divorce papers, all hell breaks loose. She erupts in rage, screaming, demanding answers, acting as though this is all coming out of nowhere. She begs, pleads, then turns vicious, accusing him of overreacting and of trying to destroy their family. But her words fall on deaf ears. She refuses to sign at first, convinced that she can still find a way to regain control of the situation. But after a few days, her arrogance turns into defiance. She decides she won't just fight the divorce, she will fight him in court. She underestimates him. Amma had no idea that, before taking action, he had already confronted Alex in private. And Alex had given it to him, perhaps out of guilt, or maybe just to clear his own conscience. Alex had admitted to the affair. He even apologized, promising it wouldn't happen again. But words meant nothing. What mattered was the recording. The entire confession, every word, every admission, every detail was saved, ready to be used when the time came. So when Amma tried to drag him into court, hoping to play the victim, he came prepared. On the first day in court, he sat in silence as she weaved her story, painting herself as the betrayed wife, the woman abandoned by a cruel and unforgiving husband. She fought for alimony. She fought for property. She fought for everything she thought she could take from him. Then it was his turn. With calm precision, he presented the DNA results, proving that 2 of the 3 children were not his. He provided the recorded confession from Alex, proving beyond doubt that she had been unfaithful. He brought the child that was truly his, proving that he was the only stable parent in the equation. He even had witnesses, including the family friend who had caught her in the act. Amma's entire case collapsed before her eyes. By the time the case was over, she had nothing significant left. She had wasted so much money trying to fight him that she found herself drowning in legal fees and debt. The properties? He kept most of them. Custody? He won. Everything she had tried to take from him, she lost. And when the final ruling was made, he never looked back. He walked away, leaving her alone to face the ruins of the family she destroyed.